The autumn wind carried the scent of diesel and fallen leaves across the parking lot of St. Catherine's Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. Frank Holloway sat in the cab of his Kenworth W900, staring at the building through rain-streaked windows, wondering what had possessed him to agree to this. 47 years old, 23 of them spent behind the wheel of one truck or another, and Frank had thought he had seen everything the road had to offer. He had hauled freight through blizzards and hurricanes, had watched the sun rise over the Rockies and set over the Pacific, had crossed every state in the continental United States at least a dozen times. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what waited inside that hospital. His dispatcher had called 3 days ago with an unusual request. A non-profit organization called Final Dreams was looking for a truck driver willing to take a sick child on her dream trip. The girl was 8 years old. Her name was Lily Monroe, and she wanted more than anything in the world to see the ocean before she died. Frank had said yes before he fully understood what he was agreeing to. Now, sitting in the parking lot with the engine idling, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. He was a trucker, not a caregiver. He knew how to read a road atlas and manage a logbook, not how to comfort a dying child. But he had given his word, and Frank Holloway kept his word. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in a small town in rural Arkansas, where his father had worked at the local feed mill and his mother had cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the other side of town. They had never had much money, but they had always had love. His father used to take him fishing on Sunday mornings, sitting by the creek in comfortable silence, teaching him patience and the value of quiet moments. When his father died of a heart attack at 53, Frank had been 22 and already restless, already looking for a way out of that small town. He had gotten his CDL license the following month and never looked back. The road became his escape, his sanctuary, his reason for getting up in the morning. But somewhere along the way, escape had turned into avoidance. He had stopped visiting his mother, who passed away while he was hauling a load of refrigerators to California. He had missed his daughter's first steps, her first words, her first day of school. He had let his marriage crumble because he was never there to tend it. Now here he was, sitting outside a children's hospital, about to take a dying girl to see the ocean. Maybe it was redemption he was looking for. Maybe it was a chance to do something that actually mattered. He climbed down from the cab, his boots splashing in the puddles that dotted the asphalt. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, just enough to make everything grey and glistening. He walked toward the hospital entrance, his heart pounding harder with every step. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a wave of warm air that carried the faint scent of disinfectant and something sweeter beneath it. Frank paused just inside the entrance, taking a moment to orient himself. Hospitals had always made him uncomfortable. They reminded him of his father's final hours, of the machines and tubes and the terrible helplessness of watching someone you love slip away. Inside, the lobby was warm and bright, decorated with cheerful murals of cartoon animals and rainbows. A massive fish tank dominated one wall, filled with colorful tropical fish that darted and swirled in endless patterns. A little boy in a wheelchair sat watching them, his bald head covered by a superhero baseball cap, his mother standing behind him with her hand on his shoulder. Frank felt his throat tighten at the sight. How many children were in this building right now, fighting battles no child should have to fight? How many parents were sitting by bedsides, praying for miracles that might never come? A woman in her 30s sat behind the reception desk, her face kind but tired. The nameplate on her desk read, Patricia, and there was a small photo of 2 smiling children tucked into the corner of her computer monitor. "Can I help you?" she asked. Frank cleared his throat. "I'm Frank Holloway. I'm here for Lily Monroe, the Final Dreams trip." The woman's face softened with recognition. "Oh, yes. Mr. Holloway, we've been expecting you." She picked up a phone and spoke quietly into it, then looked back at him. "Lily's mother will be down in just a moment. Would you like to have a seat?" Frank nodded and lowered himself into one of the plastic chairs that lined the wall. His hands were trembling slightly, and he clasped them together to steady them. Around him, the hospital hummed with quiet activity. Nurses in colourful scrubs walked past, their shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. Somewhere a child was crying, the sound muffled by distance but still audible. A doctor hurried by, her white coat flapping, a clipboard clutched to her chest. Frank watched it all, feeling like an outsider in a world he did not understand. These people dealt with life and death every single day. They held hands with the dying, comforted the grieving, celebrated the rare victories, and mourned the frequent losses. How did they do it? How did they keep coming back day after day, knowing that so many of their patients would not make it? Mr. Holloway. He looked up to see a woman standing before him. She was maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. But there was strength in her face too, a determination that had clearly carried her through more than anyone should have to bear. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, and her hands were clasped in front of her as if she did not know what else to do with them. "I'm Sarah Monroe," she said, extending her hand. "Lily's mother." Frank stood and shook her hand, noting how thin and fragile it felt in his calloused grip. "Ma'am," he said, "it's nice to meet you." Sarah smiled a tired but genuine expression. "Thank you for doing this, Mr. Holloway. You have no idea what it means to Lily. She's been talking about nothing else for weeks. Every morning when I come to see her, the first thing she asks is whether the truck driver has called yet." Frank felt his throat tighten. "It's my honor, ma'am. I just hope I can do right by her." Sarah studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. She seemed to be looking for something, some sign that she could trust this stranger with her daughter's final adventure. Frank stood still and let her look, knowing that she needed this reassurance. Then she nodded, as if she had found what she was looking for. "You will," she said simply. "I can tell. Would you like to meet her?" They walked together through a maze of corridors, past rooms filled with children in various stages of illness and recovery. Frank tried not to look too closely, afraid of what he might see, but his eyes were drawn to the small faces despite himself. So many children, he thought. So many families fighting battles that most people never had to imagine. Sarah stopped outside a door decorated with hand-drawn butterflies and flowers. She took a deep breath, and Frank saw her composing herself, putting on the brave face that mothers everywhere learn to wear. "She has good days and bad days," Sarah said quietly. "Today is a good day, but she gets tired easily, and she has to take her medications on schedule. I've packed everything she needs. The doctors have approved the trip, but they've given me a list of warning signs to watch for. I'll be going with you, of course." "Of course," Frank agreed. Sarah pushed open the door, and Frank followed her into the room. It was a small space, made smaller by all the equipment that surrounded the bed in the center. Monitors beeped softly, tubes snaked across white sheets, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something sweeter, like the strawberry shampoo his daughter used to wear. And there, propped up against a pile of pillows, was Lily. She was tiny, even for 8 years old, her body lost in the folds of a hospital gown decorated with dancing teddy bears. Her hair was gone, lost to the treatments that had tried and failed to save her, but someone had tied a bright pink scarf around her head, giving her a jaunty, almost defiant appearance. Her skin was pale and paper-thin, stretched tight over delicate bones. But her eyes were huge and bright, the deep blue of a summer sky, and they sparkled with a joy that seemed impossible given everything she had been through. "Are you the truck driver?" she asked, her voice surprisingly strong. "Are you the one who's going to take me to see the ocean?" Frank felt something crack open in his chest, some wall he had built around his heart years ago. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice rough. "That's me. My name's Frank." Lily grinned, revealing a gap where her 2 front teeth should have been. "I'm Lily," she said, "but you probably already knew that. I've been waiting for you for forever." Frank found himself smiling despite the tightness in his throat. "Well, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. You ready to hit the road?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Right now? We're leaving right now?" Sarah stepped forward, smoothing her daughter's scarf. "Soon, sweetheart. Mr. Holloway needs to get everything set up in his truck first, and we need to pack your bag. But yes, we'll leave today." Lily clapped her hands together, the motion sending a slight tremor through the tubes connected to her arm. "I can't believe it's really happening," she breathed. "I'm going to see the ocean, the real, actual ocean." Frank knelt down beside her bed, bringing himself to her eye level. "You sure are," he said, "and I'm going to make sure it's the best trip you've ever had. Have you ever been in a big rig before?" Lily shook her head, her eyes growing even wider. "Is it really as big as it looks in pictures?" "Even bigger," Frank assured her. "It's like driving a house down the highway. You'll be able to see everything from up there. All the cars will look like toys." Lily giggled, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "That's so cool. My friend Marcus in room 204, he says trucks are the best thing ever. He's going to be so jealous when I tell him." "You can take pictures to show him," Sarah suggested. "We packed the camera Aunt Jenny gave you, remember?" "Oh, yeah." Lily's face lit up even more. "I'm going to take 1,000,000 pictures of the truck and the road and the ocean and everything." Frank stood, his knees protesting the movement. He was not as young as he used to be, and the years on the road had taken their toll. But looking at Lily's radiant face, he felt something stir inside him that he had not felt in a long time. Purpose. Real, genuine purpose. "I'm going to go get the truck ready," he said. "You get packed up and I'll be back in an hour. Sound good?" "Sounds perfect," Lily said. And then, so softly he almost missed it, "Thank you, Mr. Frank. Thank you so much." Frank had to turn away quickly, afraid she would see the tears forming in his eyes. "See you soon, kid," he managed. And then he was out the door, walking fast through the corridors, not stopping until he reached the parking lot, and the cool autumn air hit his face. He stood beside his truck for a long moment, breathing deeply, trying to compose himself. What had he gotten himself into? This little girl, so small and sick and full of light, was counting on him to give her one last adventure. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical thing, but he would not let her down. He could not. Frank climbed into the cab and began preparing for the journey. He had made modifications for this trip, working through the night with a buddy who owned an auto shop. The sleeping berth behind the seats had been outfitted with a small but comfortable bed, complete with guardrails to keep Lily safe during the drive. There was a mini refrigerator stocked with juice boxes and applesauce and all the soft food Sarah had requested. A portable DVD player was mounted where Lily could see it, loaded with every Disney movie Frank could find. He had even hung fairy lights around the berth, tiny twinkling stars that would glow softly in the darkness. A silly touch, maybe, but something had told him that a little girl who dreamed of seeing the ocean might also dream of sleeping under the stars. An hour later, he pulled the truck up to the hospital's patient loading area and climbed down to meet them. Sarah emerged first, carrying 2 large bags and looking slightly overwhelmed. Behind her, a nurse pushed a wheelchair, and in that wheelchair sat Lily, bundled in blankets despite the mild weather, her pink scarf bright against the grey day. "There it is!" Lily exclaimed, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "There's the truck. Mom, look how big it is." Frank hurried to help, taking the bags from Sarah and stowing them in the compartment beneath the cab. When he turned back, Lily was staring up at the truck with an expression of pure wonder. "Can I touch it?" she asked. Frank smiled. "You can do more than touch it. You can climb up in there and see the whole world from the driver's seat." Lily looked at her mother, her eyes pleading. "Can I, Mom? Can I?" Sarah hesitated, glancing at the nurse, who shrugged and nodded. "Okay," she said, "but be careful." Frank lifted Lily from the wheelchair, shocked by how little she weighed. She was like holding a bundle of feathers, so fragile he was afraid she might break. He carried her to the driver's side and helped her climb up into the seat, watching as her face transformed with delight. "I can see everything from here," Lily crowed. "I can see the whole parking lot and the trees and the birds and everything. Mum, you have to come see this." Sarah climbed up on the other side, settling into the passenger seat, her face softening as she watched her daughter's joy. "It's pretty amazing, isn't it, baby? It's the most amazing thing ever," Lily declared. She looked at Frank, who was still standing on the ground. "Can we go now? Can we start the adventure?" Frank laughed, a real laugh that surprised even him. "Let me get you settled in your special spot first, and then we'll hit the road." He climbed up and helped Lily into the berth behind the seats, showing her all the features he had installed. Her eyes grew wide when she saw the fairy lights, and she reached up to touch them with trembling fingers. "They're like stars," she whispered. "Indoor stars." "That's what I was going for," Frank admitted. "I figured if you're going to travel across the country, you should have stars to keep you company." Lily looked at him, her blue eyes suddenly serious. "You're a really nice man, Mr. Frank, I can tell." Frank felt that crack in his heart widen a little more. "Well," he said gruffly, trying to hide his emotion, "you're a pretty special kid. Now let's get this show on the road." He helped Sarah get Lily settled, showing her how the guardrails worked, how to reach the juice boxes in the mini-fridge, how to work the DVD player. Then he climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and felt the familiar rumble vibrate through the cab. "Here we go," he announced. "Next stop, the ocean." Lily cheered from the berth behind him, and even Sarah managed a smile, though Frank could see the worry lurking in her eyes. He understood. How could any mother not worry, watching her child slip away day by day, knowing that each adventure might be the last? But that was exactly why they were doing this. Not to pretend the darkness was not coming, but to fill the remaining light with as much joy as possible. Frank guided the truck out of the parking lot and onto the highway, heading east toward the Atlantic coast. They had decided on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, a place Sarah had visited as a child and always wanted to share with her daughter. It was about 600 miles from Memphis, a trip that would normally take about 9 hours, but that they planned to stretch over 2 days, taking their time, stopping wherever Lily wanted. The first hour passed quickly, Lily keeping up a steady stream of commentary from the berth. "Look at that cow," she would exclaim, or "Oh wow, that bridge is so high," or "Why are all the cars so tiny from up here?" Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Frank found himself seeing the road through new eyes, noticing details he had long since stopped paying attention to. Sarah sat quietly in the passenger seat, her gaze alternating between the road ahead and her daughter behind them. Frank could only imagine what she was feeling, the bittersweet mixture of joy and grief that must be tearing at her heart. "How long has she been sick?" he asked quietly, when Lily had finally settled down to watch a movie. Sarah was silent for a moment. "Since she was 6, she said finally. "Leukemia. They thought they had caught it early, but—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm sorry," Frank said. The words felt inadequate, but what else was there to say? Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the passing landscape. "She's fought so hard," she said. "Every treatment, every procedure, every setback. She never complained, never asked why me. She just kept going, kept smiling, kept dreaming." "The ocean," Frank said. "The ocean," Sarah confirmed. "She saw a documentary about the Atlantic when she was 7. The waves, the sand, the endless blue horizon. She's been obsessed ever since. She has pictures all over her hospital room. She talks about it constantly, and now—" She swallowed hard. "Now she's finally going to see it." Frank gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. "She will," he said firmly. "I promise you that. Whatever it takes, she's going to see that ocean." They stopped for lunch at a rest area in the mountains of Tennessee, finding a picnic table under a spreading oak tree. Lily was tired but refused to admit it, insisting on walking the few steps from the truck to the table, even though every movement seemed to exhaust her. "Look at the leaves," she said, pointing at the canopy above them. "They're all different colors, red and orange and yellow, like the trees are on fire, but in a pretty way." Frank spread out the lunch Sarah had packed. simple sandwiches and fruit and cookies that looked homemade. Lily ate slowly, more out of duty than appetite, but she seemed to enjoy being outside, breathing the fresh air, watching the other travelers come and go. "Where are all those people going?" she asked. Frank shrugged. "All over, probably. Some are going home, some are going to work, some are on vacation. That's the thing about the road. It connects everything to everything else." Lily considered this. "So the road I'm on right now is connected to the ocean?" "All the way," Frank confirmed. "This road leads to another road, which leads to another road, and eventually they all lead to the sea." "That's like magic," Lily said softly. "All these roads going everywhere, connecting everyone." Sarah reached over and smoothed her daughter's scarf. "You should rest a little, sweetheart. We've got a long way to go." "But I don't want to miss anything," Lily protested. "You won't," Frank assured her. "I'll wake you up if we see anything really good. But your mom's right. You need to save your strength for the ocean." Lily's eyes brightened at the mention of the ocean. "Okay," she agreed reluctantly. "But promise you'll wake me up?" "I promise." They got her settled back in the berth, and within minutes she was asleep, her breathing soft and even, the fairy lights casting a gentle glow over her peaceful face. Sarah watched her for a long moment, then turned to face the road ahead. "She's getting weaker," she said quietly. "Faster than the doctors expected." Frank did not know what to say. He had known this trip was about giving a dying child one last wish, but confronting the reality of it was harder than he had anticipated. "How long?" he asked, the words sticking in his throat. Sarah shook her head. "They don't know. Weeks, maybe less. That's why we couldn't wait. That's why this trip had to happen now." "We'll get her to that ocean," Frank said again, and this time it sounded less like a promise and more like a prayer. They drove on through the afternoon, the mountains giving way to rolling hills and then to flatter terrain as they crossed into North Carolina. The sun broke through the clouds, flooding the landscape with golden light, and Frank felt a small spark of hope kindle in his chest. Lily woke around 4 o'clock, refreshed and eager to see where they were. Frank handed her a juice box and answered her endless questions about the trucks they passed, the signs along the highway, the towns they drove through. Her curiosity seemed boundless, her delight in every new sight undiminished by her illness. They stopped for the night at a small motel outside Asheville, a place Frank had stayed many times before on his routes through the region. The mountains rose around them, dark silhouettes against the fading sky, and the air was crisp with the promise of autumn. The owner, a heavy-set woman named Dolores, took one look at Lily and immediately upgraded them to her best room, refusing any extra payment. "You just get that little angel to the ocean," she said firmly, "and stop by on your way back. I want to hear all about it." Dolores knelt down to Lily's level, her weathered face softening. "You know what, sweetheart? I've got a granddaughter about your age. She loves the ocean too. When you get there, you splash in the waves extra hard for her, okay?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I will. What's her name?" "Emma," Dolores said. "She lives in Florida. I don't get to see her much." "Maybe you could call her," Lily suggested, "and tell her about me. And then when I go to the ocean, it'll be like she's there too." Dolores blinked rapidly, clearly fighting back tears. "That's a beautiful idea, honey. I'll do that. I'll call her tonight and tell her all about you." Frank watched the exchange with a lump in his throat. Lily had been in this woman's life for all of 5 minutes, and already she was thinking about making connections, spreading joy, bringing people together. It was like she could not help herself, like kindness was simply part of who she was. Dolores insisted on making them dinner, a hearty meal of pot roast and vegetables that she brought to their room on a covered tray. "She's too thin," she whispered to Sarah as she set down the food. "You make sure she eats." "We're trying," Sarah said. "Some days are better than others." Dolores nodded, understanding etched in every line of her face. "My sister went through the same thing with her boy," she said quietly, 20 years ago now. "But I remember how hard it was." She paused, then added, You're a good mother. Don't let anyone tell you different." After Dolores left, they ate in the cozy warmth of the motel room, the mountain air seeping in through the slightly open window. Lily managed half a biscuit and a few bites of meat before declaring herself full, but her eyes were bright and her spirits high. "Tell me about the other places you've been, Mr. Frank," she said, curling up on the bed with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "In your truck, I mean. What's the most beautiful place you've ever seen?" Frank considered the question. "That's a tough one," he said. "I've seen a lot of beautiful places. The Grand Canyon at sunrise, the redwood forests in California, the Northern Lights in Minnesota one winter." "You've seen the Northern Lights?" Lily's eyes went wide. "What do they look like?" "Like curtains made of green and purple light," Frank said, "dancing across the sky. It's like the universe is putting on a show just for you." Lily sighed dreamily. "I wish I could see that." "Maybe someday you will," Frank said, then caught himself, just as Sarah had earlier. But Lily just smiled, that wise, accepting smile that seemed too old for her young face. "It's okay," she said. "The ocean is enough. The ocean is more than enough." Sarah excused herself to use the bathroom, and Frank suspected it was more to compose herself than anything else. He sat with Lily in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching her eyelids grow heavy. "Mr. Frank," she said suddenly. "Yeah, do you believe in heaven?" The question caught Frank off guard. He had not thought much about heaven in years, had let his faith slip away somewhere along the endless miles of highway. But looking into Lily's earnest face, he found himself wanting to believe again. "I think I do," he said carefully. "I think there's something after this life, something beautiful." Lily nodded. "My mom talks about it sometimes. She says when I get there, I'll be able to do all the things I never got to do here, like see the Northern Lights, and ride a horse, and eat all the ice cream I want without getting sick." "That sounds pretty good," Frank said. "Yeah." Lily was quiet for a moment. "But I'm not scared about it. Dying, I mean. I used to be, but now I'm not." "Do you know why?" Frank shook his head. "Because I know my mom will be sad, but she won't be alone," Lily said. "She has Aunt Jenny and Grandma and all the nurses at the hospital. And she has you now too, Mr. Frank. You're her friend. You're both our friend." Frank felt tears prick at his eyes. "That's right," he said roughly. "I am, and I always will be." "Good." Lily yawned, her eyes fluttering closed. "That's good." She was asleep within moments, her breathing soft and steady. Sarah emerged from the bathroom, her eyes red but her composure regained. She looked at her sleeping daughter, then at Frank. "Thank you," she whispered, "for talking to her, for being here." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," Frank said, and meant it completely. Lily was enchanted by the motel, treating it like another adventure. She explored every corner of the room, tested the beds, marveled at the tiny bottles of shampoo in the bathroom. By the time Sarah had given her medications and gotten her ready for bed, she was practically bouncing with excitement. "Tomorrow we'll be even closer to the ocean," she said, as Sarah tucked her in. "Maybe I'll be able to smell it." "Can you smell the ocean from far away, Mr. Frank?" Frank, who had taken a chair by the window to give them privacy, smiled. "Sometimes," he said. "When the wind is right, you can smell the salt in the air from miles away." Lily closed her eyes, a dreamy expression on her face. "I can't wait. I'm going to put my feet in the water and collect shells and build a sand castle and watch the waves forever and ever." "You'll do all of that," Sarah promised, her voice catching slightly. "Now get some sleep, baby. Tomorrow's a big day." Lily was asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and regular. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just watching her, and Frank pretended not to see the tears sliding down her cheeks. He stepped outside to give her privacy, standing in the motel parking lot and looking up at the stars. They were bright here, away from the city lights, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. He thought about Lily's fairy lights, her indoor stars, and wondered if she was dreaming about them now. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Marie. "Dad, I heard about what you're doing. I'm so proud of you. Call me when you can." Frank smiled and typed back, "Will do, love you." He and Marie had not always been close. The years on the road had taken their toll on his family, just as they had taken their toll on his body. His wife had left him 15 years ago, unable to bear the loneliness any longer, and Marie had chosen to stay with her mother. For a long time, they had barely spoken, but things had changed in recent years. Marie had gotten married, had kids of her own, and somewhere along the way, she had found room in her heart to forgive him for all the times he had been absent. They talked regularly now, saw each other when his roots brought him near her home in Atlanta. It was not the relationship he wished he had built, but it was something. It was a second chance. He thought about second chances as he stood there under the stars, about the roads not taken, the opportunities missed, the moments lost to time. He thought about Lily, who would never have the chance to grow up, to fall in love, to have children of her own, who was running out of second chances, and he thought about what he could give her in the time she had left. Not much, in the grand scheme of things. Just a truck ride and a view of the ocean, just a few days of adventure. But maybe that was enough. Maybe, for a little girl who had spent most of her short life in hospital rooms, a few days of adventure was everything. Frank went back inside and found Sarah sitting by the window, much as he had been outside. "You should get some sleep," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. She trailed off, shaking her head. Frank sat down in the other chair, keeping his voice low so as not to wake Lily. "I have a daughter," he said. "She's 32 now. When she was little, I wasn't around much. Always on the road, always chasing the next load. I missed her childhood, missed most of her life, really." Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed but curious. "I used to think I was doing the right thing," Frank continued, "providing for my family, keeping food on the table. But looking back, I realize I was just running from the hard parts of being a father, the day-to-day stuff that really matters." "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked. Frank was quiet for a moment. "Because I want you to know that what you're doing, being here with Lily, giving her this trip, being present for every moment she has left, that's the most important thing you could ever do. You're not running. You're staying, and that takes more courage than anything I ever did on the road." Sarah's face crumpled, and she covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a sob. "It's so hard," she whispered, watching her slip away, "knowing I can't save her." "I know," Frank said. "I can't imagine. But she knows you love her. She knows you're fighting for her. And this trip, this ocean she's going to see tomorrow, she's going to remember it forever, however long forever turns out to be." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For the truck and the fairy lights and the way you talk to her like she's just a normal kid, not a patient. She needs that. She needs to feel normal." "She is normal," Frank said. "She's just a kid who wants to see the ocean. Nothing more complicated than that." They sat in silence for a while, watching Lily sleep, listening to the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Eventually, Sarah rose and went to her own bed, and Frank stretched out on the small couch, his feet hanging off the end. He did not sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, her bright blue eyes, her gap-toothed smile. He thought about all the children he had passed on the road over the years, all the families in all the cars, and wondered how many of them were fighting battles he would never know about. The road connected everything, Lily had said. All these roads, going everywhere, connecting everyone. She was right, more right than she probably knew. Morning came grey and overcast, but Lily woke with energy, her excitement about the ocean overwhelming her fatigue. She chatted all through breakfast, barely touching her oatmeal, asking question after question about what the beach would look like, sound like, feel like. "Is the sand really soft?" she asked. "Like powder?" "In some places," Frank said. "In other places it's more gritty. But you'll be able to feel it between your toes, and the water is cold. This time of year, probably a little bit, but I bet you're brave enough to handle it." Lily grinned. "I'm the bravest person I know," she declared. My doctor says so. He says I'm the bravest kid he's ever met. I believe it, Frank said. They loaded up the truck and hit the road, heading east toward the coast. The clouds began to break as they drove, letting through patches of blue sky that grew larger and larger until the sun was shining fully and the day had transformed into something beautiful. Lily watched it all from the berth, her face pressed against the small window, her eyes drinking in every detail. They passed farms and forests, small towns and sprawling cities, bridges and rivers, and endless stretches of highway. And then, about an hour from the coast, Lily suddenly sat up straight. "I smell it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I smell the ocean." Frank rolled down his window and inhaled deeply. She was right. There it was, faint but unmistakable, the sharp, salty tang of the sea. "We're getting close," he said. The next hour was the longest of Frank's life. Lily was practically vibrating with anticipation, asking every few minutes how much farther, when would they get there, could she see it yet? Sarah tried to keep her calm, but she was clearly just as excited, her own face lighting up with memories of childhood visits to this same coast. And then, finally, they crested a small hill, and there it was. The Atlantic Ocean stretched out before them, vast and blue and infinite, waves rolling in toward the shore in an endless rhythm that had been going on since the beginning of time. The sun sparkled on the water like scattered diamonds, and seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries carried on the salt-tinged breeze. The beach itself was a ribbon of pale gold, curving away in both directions until it disappeared into the haze of distance. Frank pulled the truck to a stop, and for a long moment no one spoke. No one could speak. The sight before them was too enormous, too beautiful, too overwhelming for words. Lily was silent, completely, utterly silent. Her hands were pressed against the window, her eyes enormous, her mouth hanging open. Frank glanced in the rearview mirror and saw tears streaming down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of wonder, of joy, of a dream finally coming true. "Mom," she whispered finally, "Mom, it's real. It's really real." Sarah was crying too, reaching back to grasp her daughter's hand. "It's real, baby. It's really real. We made it. We really made it." Frank felt his own eyes burning with unshed tears. He had seen the ocean hundreds of times in his years on the road, had grown almost immune to its beauty, but seeing it through Lily's eyes, experiencing her wonder and amazement, made it feel like the first time all over again. "It's so big," Lily breathed. "I knew it was big, but I didn't know it was this big. It goes on forever. Does it really go all the way to Africa?" "All the way," Frank confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "And Europe, and everywhere else. All the oceans are connected, all around the world." Lily shook her head slowly, as if trying to absorb this information. "That's amazing. That's the most amazing thing I've ever heard." Frank pulled the truck into a parking area near the beach, a spot reserved for larger vehicles that gave them a perfect view of the water. He turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the sound of the waves, feeling the weight of the moment settle over all of them. "Can I go down there?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "Can I touch it?" "Of course," Frank said. "That's why we're here." He helped her out of the truck, carrying her across the parking lot and down the wooden steps that led to the beach. The sand was soft and warm, and Lily insisted on taking off her shoes so she could feel it between her toes. "It's like walking on clouds," she said, giggling, as her feet sank into the sand. Warm, squishy clouds. Sarah walked beside them, holding Lily's hand, her own shoes dangling from her other hand. The beach was mostly empty at this hour, just a few early morning walkers and a man throwing a ball for his dog in the distance. It felt private, sacred somehow, like the world had given them this moment just for themselves. They made their way slowly toward the water, Lily stopping every few steps to examine a shell or a piece of driftwood or a particularly interesting rock. Everything delighted her. Everything was worthy of wonder. And then they reached the edge of the waves. Lily stood there, the water lapping at her feet, and lifted her face to the sky. The breeze caught her pink scarf and made it flutter like a flag. The sun warmed her pale skin, and she smiled. The biggest, brightest smile Frank had ever seen. "It's perfect," she said. "It's the most perfect thing in the whole world." They stayed on the beach for hours. Lily collected shells until her pockets overflowed, then started filling a bucket Sarah had brought. She built a sand castle, small and lopsided but magnificent in its own way. She waded into the water up to her knees, shrieking with laughter at the cold, refusing to come out until her lips turned blue. Around midday, a group of children appeared on the beach. A birthday party from the looks of it, all balloons and noise and boundless energy. Lily watched them with something between longing and contentment in her eyes. "Do you want to go say hi?" Sarah asked. Lily shook her head. "I'm happy here." She looked at her bucket of shells, then at her sandcastle, then at the endless ocean stretching toward the horizon. "I have everything I need." But the children noticed her anyway. A little girl about Lily's age broke away from the group and came running over, her pigtails bouncing. "Hi, I'm Maya," she announced. "It's my birthday. I'm turning 8. Do you want a piece of cake?" Lily's face lit up. "Really? I can have cake?" Maya nodded enthusiastically. "My mom says everyone on the beach can have cake if they want." She looked at Lily more closely, taking in the scarf on her head, the paleness of her skin. "Are you sick?" Sarah tensed, but Lily just smiled. "Yeah," she said matter-of-factly. "I have leukemia. It's a kind of cancer." Maya considered this information. "My grandpa had cancer," she said. "He lost all his hair too, but then it grew back. Maybe yours will grow back too." "Maybe," Lily agreed. "Do you want to build sandcastles with me?" Maya asked. "The other kids are being boring. They just want to play tag." "I'd love to," Lily said. For the next hour, Lily and Maya worked side by side, constructing an elaborate castle complex, complete with a moat and towers and a drawbridge made from a piece of driftwood. Frank and Sarah watched from a distance, and even Maya's parents came over to observe. "They seem to really hit it off," Maya's mother said, a friendly woman with a kind smile. "I'm Jennifer. That's my daughter Maya, and our birthday girl." As she keeps reminding everyone, "I'm Sarah, and that's Lily." She hesitated, then added, "We're on a special trip. Lily wanted to see the ocean." Jennifer nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. She did not ask questions, did not pry. She simply said, "Well, you couldn't have picked a more beautiful day." "No," Sarah agreed, "we couldn't have." When Maya's party was ready to leave, Maya insisted on exchanging something with Lily. She pulled a friendship bracelet off her own wrist and tied it around Lily's. "So you'll remember me," Maya said seriously, "and the best birthday ever." Lily removed a small shell from her pocket, the prettiest one she had collected. "And so you'll remember me," she replied. "And the ocean." The two girls hugged, and then Maya ran off to join her party, turning back to wave until she disappeared over the dune. "I made a friend," Lily said wonderingly. "A real friend. At the ocean." "You sure did," Sarah said, her voice thick. Frank sat on the sand and watched, his heart full and breaking at the same time. This little girl, so full of life despite everything, squeezing every drop of joy from this one perfect day. She was teaching him something, he realized. Something about living, about appreciating, about finding beauty in the moments that remained. "Do you think Maya will remember me?" Lily asked later, as they walked slowly back toward the restaurant. "I think," Frank said, "that Maya will remember you for the rest of her life. And every time she looks at that shell, she'll think of the friend she made at the ocean, the bravest friend she ever had." Lily beamed. "That's what I hope. I hope she remembers." In the afternoon, when Lily finally admitted she was tired, they carried her to a small restaurant overlooking the water. She ate fish and chips, declaring them the best thing she had ever tasted, and watched the waves through the window with a look of pure contentment. "I did it," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. "I really did it. I saw the ocean. You sure did, Sarah said, stroking her daughter's cheek. You sure did, baby. They found a hotel right on the beach, a small place with rooms that looked out over the water. Lily insisted on keeping the curtains open so she could see the ocean from her bed, and she fell asleep watching the waves roll in, a smile on her face even in slumber. Frank stepped out onto the balcony, breathing in the salt air. Sarah joined him a few minutes later, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Thank you for giving her this." Frank shook his head. She gave it to herself. "All I did was drive." Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time since Frank had met her. "You did more than drive. You gave her the trip of her dreams. You made her feel special, not sick. You treated her like a person, not a patient. That matters more than you know." They stood in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. "What happens now?" Frank asked. Sarah's smile faded. "We go home. Back to the hospital. Back to—" She could not finish the sentence. "I'm sorry," Frank said. The words were inadequate, but he said them anyway. Sarah nodded. "Me too. But you know what?" She paused, looking back through the window at her sleeping daughter. "I'm also grateful. For this trip. For you. For every moment we've had together. That's what I'm going to hold on to. Not the ending, but the moments." Frank thought about his own life, the moments he had missed, the ones he had wasted, and he thought about the ones he still had left. "That's wise," he said. "I think you're right." They stayed another day, letting Lily have one more morning on the beach. She was weaker now, the exertion of the previous day having taken its toll, but her spirit was undimmed. She sat in a beach chair and watched the waves, her face peaceful, her eyes full of wonder. "The ocean goes all the way to Africa," she said at one point. "I learned that in school. If I had a boat, I could sail all the way to Africa." "Maybe someday," Sarah said, then caught herself, her face crumbling. "It's okay, Mom," Lily said softly, reaching for her mother's hand. "I know I won't get to go to Africa, but I got to come here. I got to see this. That's enough. That's more than enough." Frank had to turn away, unable to watch the impossible wisdom in that little girl's eyes. 8 years old, facing the end of her life, and she was comforting her mother, telling her it was enough. He walked down to the water's edge, letting the waves wash over his feet, and he cried, really cried, for the first time in years. For Lily, for Sarah, for all the children in all the hospitals fighting battles they should never have to fight. For himself, for the years he had wasted, for the second chances he had been given that Lily would never have. When he finally composed himself and walked back to where they were sitting, Lily was looking at him with those bright blue eyes. "It's okay to be sad, Mr. Frank," she said. "I get sad too sometimes. But then I remember all the good things, and I feel better." Frank knelt down beside her chair. "You're something else, Lily Monroe," he said. "You know that." Lily grinned, that gap-toothed smile that had stolen his heart 3 days ago. "My mom says I'm one of a kind." "Your mom is right," Frank said. "One of a kind doesn't even begin to cover it." They left the beach that afternoon, beginning the long drive back to Memphis. Lily was tired, sleeping most of the way, but every time she woke, she asked to look at the pictures they had taken. Shell after shell, sandcastle after sandcastle, wave after wave. "These are the best pictures ever," she said. "I'm going to show everyone, Marcus and Dr. Kim and Nurse Jenny and everyone. They'll love them," Sarah said. "They'll be so happy you got to have this adventure." Lily nodded, her eyes growing heavy again. "It was the best adventure," she murmured as she drifted off. "The best adventure ever." They stopped at Dolores's motel on the way back, as promised. The old woman met them in the parking lot, her face eager for news. "Well," she demanded, "how was it? Did she see the ocean?" "I saw everything," Lily reported proudly. "I put my feet in the water and collected shells and built a sandcastle and made a friend named Maya, who turned 8. Dolores clapped her hands together. "That's wonderful, honey. Just wonderful." She reached into her apron pocket. "I have something for you. My granddaughter Emma sent it." She handed Lily a small package. Inside was a necklace with a silver dolphin pendant. "Emma said dolphins are good luck," Dolores explained, "and she wanted you to have this so you'd have good luck forever." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Tell her thank you." "Tell her I love it." "I will, sweetheart, I will." Dolores insisted on feeding them dinner before they continued on their way. Another home-cooked meal that filled the truck cab with delicious aromas. As they ate, she told stories about her own life, about her late husband who had been a fisherman, about her children scattered across the country, about the small joys and large sorrows that made up a lifetime. "Life is hard," she said at one point, looking directly at Lily. "It's hard and it's unfair and sometimes it breaks your heart. But it's also beautiful, and that's the part you have to hold on to, the beautiful parts." "That's what I'm doing," Lily said solemnly. "I'm holding on to all the beautiful parts." When they finally pulled out of the motel parking lot, Dolores stood waving until they disappeared around the bend. Frank caught a glimpse of her in his side mirror, wiping her eyes with her apron. "She was nice," Lily said. "She was," Frank agreed. "The world is full of nice people. Sometimes you just have to look for them." Frank drove through the night, wanting to get them home before Lily became any weaker. Sarah dozed in the passenger seat, exhausted beyond words. The highway stretched out before them, empty and dark, the headlights cutting a path through the blackness. Somewhere in Tennessee, Lily woke and asked Frank to tell her more stories. So he did. He told her about the time he got caught in a blizzard in Colorado and had to spend 3 days in a diner with 20 other stranded travelers. About the wild horses he had seen running free in Nevada. About the elderly couple he had once helped change a tire in the middle of nowhere, who had insisted on making him a home-cooked meal in their RV. "You've had so many adventures," Lily said when he finished. "Your whole life is an adventure." "I suppose it is," Frank said, "though I didn't always see it that way. Sometimes when you're living it, you forget how special it is. That's what my mom says too. She says sometimes we're so busy worrying about tomorrow that we forget to enjoy today. Your mom is a smart woman." "The smartest," Lily agreed. She looked out the window at the darkness rushing past. "Mr. Frank, when you're driving all alone at night, do you ever get scared?" Frank considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but mostly I feel peaceful. Like the whole world is asleep and I'm the only one awake, keeping watch." "That's beautiful," Lily said. She yawned, her small body curling up in the berth. "I like that, keeping watch." She was asleep again within moments, and Frank drove on through the darkness, keeping watch over this small, precious cargo. He thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 days. A little girl with bright blue eyes and a gap-toothed smile. An ocean that went all the way to Africa. Shells and sandcastles and waves that rolled in forever. And a question that kept echoing in his mind: what am I going to do with the time I have left? They reached Memphis just as the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Frank pulled the truck into the hospital parking lot and turned off the engine, sitting in silence for a long moment. Sarah stirred beside him, blinking awake. "We're here? We're here," Frank confirmed. Lily woke as they were lifting her from the truck, her eyes fluttering open to see the hospital building looming above them. She looked at it for a moment, then back at Frank. "Thank you, Mr. Frank," she said softly. "Thank you for the best adventure ever." Frank felt his throat tighten. "It was my honor, Lily. Every single mile." They took her inside, back to the room with the cartoon animal murals and the beeping monitors and the antiseptic smell. But now there was something new on the walls. Lily's pictures from the trip, hastily printed at a drugstore on the way home, showing the ocean in all its glory. "I'm going to look at these every day," Lily announced as Frank and Sarah pinned them up. "And I'll remember how the water felt on my feet, and how the sand squished between my toes, and how the seagulls sounded." "You'll remember," Sarah agreed, her voice breaking. "You'll always remember the hospital staff gathered to see the pictures, nurses and doctors, and even the janitor who always had a smile for Lily." She held court from her bed, describing every moment of the trip in vivid detail, showing off the friendship bracelet from Maya and the dolphin necklace from Emma. "And the waves were this big," she said, holding her hands far apart, "and the sand was so soft, and I made a friend, a real friend from the beach." Nurse Jenny, a young woman who had been caring for Lily since her first admission, wiped her eyes. "That sounds amazing, sweetie. I'm so happy you got to go." "Me too," Lily said. She looked around at all the people gathered in her room. "Thank you all for taking care of me, for helping me get strong enough to go on my adventure." The room fell silent, everyone moved by the gratitude in her small voice. Dr. Kim, the oncologist, who had been with the family since the beginning, stepped forward. "Thank you for coming back to us, Lily," he said, "and for sharing your pictures. You've given all of us something beautiful to remember." Lily beamed. "That's what I wanted. I wanted to share the beautiful parts." After the crowd dispersed, Frank knew he had to go. His dispatcher was already calling about the next load, the next route, the next mile of road that needed covering. But he could not bring himself to leave. He knelt down beside Lily's bed one last time. "I'm going to have to get back on the road," he said. "But I want you to know something." "What?" Lily asked. "You changed my life," Frank said. "In 3 days, you changed my whole life. I'm going to be a better person because of you. I'm going to notice the beautiful things like you do. I'm going to stop running and start living. And every time I see the ocean, I'm going to think of you." Lily reached out and took his hand, her fingers tiny and fragile against his weathered palm. "You're already a good person, Mr. Frank," she said. "The best person. The fairy lights person." Frank laughed, a wet sound that was half sob. "The fairy lights person. I like that. Promise me something," Lily said, her voice suddenly serious. "Anything," Frank replied. "Promise me you'll go see your daughter, the one in Atlanta. Promise me you'll tell her you love her, and that you're sorry, and that you want to be part of her life. Promise me." Frank felt the words hit him like a physical blow. How did she know? How did this 8-year-old girl see right through to the heart of his deepest regret? "I promise," he said, his voice rough. "I promise, Lily." "Good." She squeezed his hand weakly. "Because family is the most important thing. That's what my grandma always said. Family and love and the beautiful parts. That's all that matters." He stood, knowing that if he did not leave now, he never would. Sarah walked him to the door, her eyes red but her back straight. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You just did," Frank replied. He hesitated, then pulled out a card and pressed it into her hand. "This is my number. If you ever need anything at all, you call me." "Okay." Sarah nodded, clutching the card like a lifeline. "Okay." Frank took one last look at Lily, at her bright blue eyes and her pink scarf and her wall full of ocean pictures. Then he turned and walked away, down the corridor, through the lobby, out into the parking lot where his truck waited. He climbed into the cab and sat there for a long time, just breathing. The sun was fully up now, flooding the world with light. Somewhere behind him, a little girl was looking at pictures of the ocean and remembering the best adventure ever. Frank started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. The road stretched before him, endless and open, connecting everything to everything else, just like Lily had said. He had a delivery to make in Nashville, then another in Louisville, then another in Indianapolis. The same roads he had been driving for 23 years, but somehow they felt different now, more meaningful, more alive. His phone buzzed, a text from Marie. "Mom says you're back. Want to come for dinner Sunday?" Frank smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. Love you." He thought about Lily's words. "It's okay to be sad, but then I remember all the good things, and I feel better." She was right. She was absolutely right. The Nashville delivery went smoothly, and Frank found himself with an afternoon free before he needed to head to Louisville. On impulse, he drove to the waterfront and parked his truck, walking along the river until he found a bench overlooking the water. He sat there for a long time, watching the boats go by, thinking about Lily. about the way she looked at the world with wonder instead of bitterness, about her ability to find joy in the smallest things, about her courage in the face of something that would have broken most adults. He pulled out his phone and called Marie. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Frank said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay," Marie said slowly. "Is there something specific on your mind?" Frank took a deep breath. "I want to apologize to you," he said, "for not being there when you were growing up, for missing your childhood, for putting the road first and you second. It was wrong, and I'm sorry." Marie was silent for so long that Frank wondered if the call had dropped. Then he heard a small sniffle. "Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been waiting my whole life to hear you say that." "I know," Frank said, "and I'm sorry it took me this long, but I want to do better. I want to be part of your life, really part of it. Not just phone calls and occasional visits. I want to know your kids, watch them grow up, be the grandfather I should be." Marie was crying now, he could hear it. "Dad," she managed, "I would love that. I would love that so much." They talked for an hour, longer than they had talked in years. Frank told her about Lily, about the trip, about the way this little girl had reached into his chest and rearranged everything inside. Marie listened, asked questions, shared her own thoughts about life and family and what really mattered. When they finally hung up, Frank felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He had carried that guilt for so long, that sense of failure as a father. But Lily had shown him that it was never too late to change, never too late to choose a different path. He made it to Louisville by nightfall and completed his delivery the next morning. Then, instead of heading to Indianapolis as planned, he called his dispatcher and asked for a few days off. "Everything okay, Big Frank?" the dispatcher asked, concern in his voice. "Better than okay," Frank replied. "I just need some time. Family time." He drove to Atlanta, to Marie's house, arriving just as the sun was setting. Marie met him at the door with her 2 children, a 5-year-old named Sophie and a 3-year-old named Jack. They were shy at first, not sure what to make of this grandfather they barely knew. But Frank had brought gifts from the road. A stuffed bear from a truck stop in Tennessee for Sophie, a toy truck for Jack, and something else, something special, a shell from the beach in North Carolina. "A friend of mine collected this," he told the children. "A very brave little girl named Lily. She wanted me to share the beautiful things with everyone I love." Sophie held the shell up to her ear. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I can hear the ocean." Frank smiled, remembering Lily's words. "The ocean goes all the way to Africa. If I had a boat, I could sail all the way to Africa." "The shell connects us to all of that," he told Sophie, "to the waves and the sand and the whole big world." He stayed for 3 days, the longest visit he had ever made. He played with the children, helped with dinner, sat on the porch with Marie and her husband talking about nothing and everything. He felt himself becoming part of their lives, slowly but surely, in a way he had never allowed himself before. On his last night, Marie found him standing in the backyard, looking up at the stars. "She changed you," Marie said softly. "That little girl." Frank nodded. "She reminded me what matters." Marie slipped her arm through his. "I'm glad you stopped," she said. "All those years, you just kept driving past. But this time you stopped." Frank thought about the truck stop where he had first met Lily, about the moment he had decided to sit down at her table instead of walking by. "Sometimes," he said, "stopping is the bravest thing you can do." The radio crackled with chatter from other drivers, sharing updates about traffic and weather and road conditions. Frank listened, feeling a kinship with these voices he had known for decades but never truly connected with. They were all out here together, hauling their loads, covering their miles, living their lives one highway at a time. Maybe it was time he started living his too. He picked up the CB and keyed the mic. "Hey, this is Big Frank out of Memphis," he said. "Just wanted to say good morning to everyone out there. It's a beautiful day. Let's make the most of it." There was a moment of surprised silence, then a chorus of responses. "Roger that, Big Frank. Beautiful day indeed. Same to you, old-timer." Frank grinned and settled into the drive, the miles unwinding beneath his wheels. He thought about Sarah and Lily, about the ocean waiting at the end of the road, about all the adventures still to be had. 3 weeks later, his phone rang. It was Sarah. "She's gone, Frank," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Yesterday afternoon, she was looking at her pictures of the ocean. She said she could hear the waves." Frank pulled his truck to the side of the road, unable to drive through the tears that flooded his eyes. "She talked about you," Sarah continued, "right at the end. She said to tell you thank you, for the fairy lights, for the adventure, for everything." Frank could not speak, could not do anything but sit there gripping the phone, feeling the weight of loss settle over him. "She was so happy," Sarah said, "these last few weeks, looking at her pictures, telling everyone about the trip. You gave her that, Frank. You gave her something beautiful to hold on to." Finally, Frank found his voice. "She gave me something too," he said. "Something I didn't even know I was missing." They talked for a while longer, sharing memories of the trip, of Lily's joy, of the way she had squeezed every drop of wonder from those 3 precious days. And then they said goodbye, promising to stay in touch, knowing that they were connected now in a way that distance could never erase. Frank sat by the side of the road for a long time after the call ended. Cars and trucks whooshed past, going about their business, unaware of the earthquake that had just rocked his world. A little girl with bright blue eyes had closed them for the last time. A gap-toothed smile had smiled its final smile. But somewhere, somehow, Frank believed she was still out there, watching the waves roll in, collecting shells, building sandcastles that would stand forever. He started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. The road stretched before him, endless and open, connecting everything to everything else. And in the rearview mirror, if he looked closely, he could almost see her, a tiny figure in a pink scarf, waving goodbye, her face full of joy. "Keep driving, Mr. Frank," she seemed to say. "Keep finding the beautiful things. Keep living." "I will, Lily," he whispered. "I promise." The truck roared on through the afternoon, carrying Frank toward the next delivery, the next mile, the next moment. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. It looked just like the ocean. 6 months later, Frank made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He sold his truck, retired from long-haul driving, and moved to a small town on the coast of North Carolina, just a few miles from where he had taken Lily on that unforgettable trip. He bought a modest house overlooking the water and spent his mornings watching the waves roll in, just as Lily had wanted to do. He volunteered with Final Dreams, helping other families plan trips for their sick children, sharing what he had learned about making every moment count. And every day, without fail, he walked down to the beach and collected shells, not for himself, but for the children who could not be there. He mailed them out by the dozens, little pieces of the ocean sent with love to hospital rooms across the country. Each package included a note, "From your friend at the beach. Keep dreaming, keep believing, keep finding the beautiful things." Marie visited him often, bringing her children to play in the sand and splash in the waves. They called him Grandpa Frank now, and he taught them everything he knew about the ocean, about the roads that led there, about the connections that bound them all together. One day, his granddaughter, a bright-eyed 7-year-old named Hope, asked him why he loved the ocean so much. Frank smiled and looked out at the endless blue horizon. "Because a very special friend showed me how beautiful it was," he said, "and now it's my job to show everyone else." "What friend?" Hope asked. "Her name was Lily," Frank said, "and she was the bravest person I ever knew." He told Hope the story, the whole story, about the truck and the fairy lights and the little girl who dreamed of seeing the sea. Hope listened with wide eyes, absorbing every detail, asking questions only a child would think to ask. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you think Lily can see the ocean now?" wherever she is. Frank looked at the waves rolling in, at the seagulls wheeling overhead, at the sun sparkling on the water like scattered diamonds. "I think," he said slowly, "that Lily can see every ocean in the whole world, and she's probably collecting all the best shells." Hope smiled, satisfied with this answer. "Can we collect shells too? For Lily?" "We absolutely can," Frank said. "She would love that." They walked down to the water's edge together, the old man and the little girl, searching for treasures among the sand and foam. The waves lapped at their feet, cold and endless and full of possibility. And somewhere, somehow, Frank could have sworn he heard laughter on the breeze. A child's laughter, bright and pure and free. "Keep finding the beautiful things, Mr. Frank," the wind seemed to whisper. "Keep living." "I will, Lily," he whispered back. "I promise." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange and pink. Hope ran ahead, chasing waves, her laughter mixing with the cries of the seagulls. Frank followed, slower but no less joyful, his pockets full of shells, his heart full of love. This was what it meant to be alive, he realized, not the miles driven or the loads hauled or the money earned, but the moments shared. The connections made, the love given and received. Lily had taught him that. In 3 short days, a dying child had taught him how to live, and he would spend the rest of his life passing that lesson on. The waves rolled in, one after another, just as they always had, just as they always would. Endless and eternal, connecting everything to everything else. And on the beach, an old truck driver watched them come, grateful for every moment, mindful of every blessing, determined to make the most of whatever time he had left. For Lily, for himself, for all the beautiful things yet to be discovered. Frank Holloway walked on into the sunset, into the rest of his life, carrying with him the memory of a little girl with bright blue eyes who had asked him for one simple thing: "Take me to the ocean." And he had, and she had changed everything. Years passed, as years do, each one bringing new joys and sorrows, new connections and farewells. Frank became a fixture in the coastal community, known for his kindness and his quiet wisdom. Children called him Uncle Frank and begged for stories about the road. Adults sought his advice and found comfort in his steady presence. He never forgot Lily. Her photograph hung in his living room, right next to his pictures of Marie and the grandchildren. Every morning he looked at it and remembered her words: "Keep finding the beautiful things." Sarah stayed in touch, calling him on holidays and Lily's birthday. She had started volunteering with Final Dreams herself, helping other families plan trips for their sick children. It was her way of honoring Lily's memory, of making sure that other children got to have their own adventures. She told Frank once that he had given Lily the best 3 days of her life. Frank told her that Lily had given him something far more valuable: the courage to live. On the 10th anniversary of Lily's passing, Frank made a special trip. He drove back to Memphis, back to St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, carrying a box full of shells from the North Carolina beach. He had been collecting them for years, the prettiest and most perfect specimens he could find. The hospital had changed since his last visit. There was a new wing, bright and modern, with a plaque by the entrance: the Lily Monroe Pediatric Care Center. Sarah had led the fundraising effort, honoring her daughter's memory by helping other children fight their own battles. Frank walked through the halls, handing out shells to every child he met. Some were too sick to appreciate the gift, but others clutched them tightly, holding them to their ears to hear the ocean. In Lily's old room, which was now occupied by a 7-year-old girl named Emma fighting her own battle with cancer, Frank sat by the bed and told stories about his travels. About the ocean and the mountains and the endless highways that connected them all. Emma listened with wide eyes, asking questions about the truck and the road and the places he had been. And when Frank left, she was wearing a smile that reminded him so much of Lily that his heart ached with bittersweet joy. Outside the hospital, Sarah was waiting for him. They stood together in the parking lot, looking up at the building where their lives had intersected so many years ago. She would be 18 now, Sarah said softly. Starting college, maybe. Falling in love. Frank nodded, feeling the familiar weight of loss settling over him. She would have been amazing, he said. She already was amazing. In 8 years, she lived more fully than most people do in 80. Sarah smiled through her tears. She taught us both how to live, didn't she? That little girl with the big dreams. She sure did, Frank agreed. They hugged goodbye, promising to stay in touch, knowing that they were bound together forever by the memory of a child who had touched both their lives in ways they could never fully express. Frank drove back to North Carolina, back to his little house overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting as he arrived, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. He walked down to the beach and stood at the water's edge, letting the waves wash over his feet just as Lily had done all those years ago. The water was cold, but he did not mind. It felt like a connection, a bridge across time to that perfect moment when a little girl had seen the ocean for the first time and declared it the most perfect thing in the whole world. "I kept my promise, Lily," he whispered to the wind. "I found the beautiful things. I lived." The waves rolled in and out, eternal and unchanging. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries mixing with the sound of the surf. And somewhere in the fading light, Frank could almost hear a child's laughter, bright and joyful and free. He smiled and walked back toward his house, toward the life he had built from the ashes of the one he had wasted. It was not the life he had planned, but it was a good life, a meaningful life. A life that Lily would have been proud of, and that was enough. That was more than enough. The end.